This is an interesting one. So this is a power supply model off a Studer, what is it, A800 24 channel reel-to-reel tape play studio, recording studio jobby. Anyway, it has 3 of these, so each one does a bank of channels, like 8 channels each. And when the owner of the machine got it, we noticed sometimes if you knock the machine and stuff, you'd see like one of the rows of dials flick, lights come on and stuff. Anyway, eventually it packed up. Tried testing it at the studio, and it fuse just blew. And anyway, I think it must have just been the fuse had gotten weakened. By the time I tried to test it, I'll go through what exactly that entailed in a minute. But basically, it's got an interesting fault, right? So it's on the dim bulb tester. If I get it out of the way, let's see if it'll do it. It's very intermittent, but if I tap it, look at that. So that's nice. It's nice. It's actually doing that constantly now. But I keep trying to measure, and just touching anything on the circuit board, something is dodgy, and just the pressure of the probes or whatever stops it being dodgy. The circuit itself, so you can ignore everything here, it's irrelevant. This is all after the transformer, and this is the part of the circuit that turns on the transformer. But we can ignore this as well because it gets its power from the tape machine. So if you ignore all of everything else, all you've got is this bit up here, and it's a really simple circuit. It's a capacitive dropper. There's just 3 of them in parallel. Low value resistor to just limit current. 2 diodes. So this is you can see, look, this directly goes to this AC connection, and this one's through the capacitive dropper. So it charges this capacitor negative with respect to this rail. And they just pull positive back up through this diode. So this capacitor gets charged. This is the positive end of it. It's actually pushing the lower end negative rather than pulling the upper end positive. And you can see there's a Zener diode here which clamps the voltage to about 12 volts. And that is then the voltage for this opto-isolator circuit. Normally when this turns on, the LED inside this internal package lights up, turns this transistor on. This fires this first track. This then fires the second track. It means there's very little load on this. So for this to be intermittently turning on, something has to be triggering these 2 tracks. Well, the only way this opto-isolator can normally turn on is through light. The only other thing that could possibly turn it on would be if the voltage across it was far too high and it was causing it to break down. So I think what's happening is one of 2 things. Either these caps, which have been notorious, if I get the torch out, oh yes, they're the notorious Reefer branded ones. Those are legendary for going short circuit intermittently as well and stuff. So it could be one of them's gone dodgy. Or the other thing is this Zener diode. If this Zener diode's got an intermittent connection or internally intermittent, when it's not making connection, it will allow this to overvoltage and turn on. So I think what happened is, because it's constantly doing that, it's a huge amount of inrush. It just stressed the fuse and eventually blew it. When I took it out of the tape machine, pulled the fuse out, it looked okay. I went to bypass the switching circuit just so I could test the transformer and stuff, and nothing happened. Took the fuse out again, it was blackened, but I think it had actually had a micro fracture in it. I don't know if it had fully blown. I think it had like the heat stresses had been enough to micro fracture it, and me taking it out, moving it, was enough to just make it almost close enough, or actually close enough to touch. And then when I've tried to fire it up, the inrush of the charge caps under the transformer was enough to actually then finish it off. So I've gone, well, something's blowing the fuses, I need to take it home, put it on the dim bulb. But firing this up, everything is fine. The regulator outputs are fine, the transformer's fine, everything is fine. It's just this circuit here doing its weirdness. So someone's been in here before I don't know if the phone will see it, but can you see down there, there's all bits of component leads and stuff soldered between places, so someone's obviously had an issue with this before. Also as well, this someone had repaired the 0V line. There's the 5-volt rail, these two, this orange and this actually black, is the 5-volt rail or 6-volt for the logic circuits on those 8-channel strips. And they've glued in a new pin. You can see it's like a brass one. They glued it in, but then they just got the old pin and soldered it to the top. Of course it had fractured off, so I've just put a small piece of wire actually soldered into the two and then soldered them back together, so at least there's a physical connection there now. So, but I think what I'm going to do is these reefer caps, I'm going to change them regardless. So I'll change them reefer caps and change that Zener diode. Get a bit of light on the job. So yeah, these reefers, I'm going to change them anyway. It's just no point leaving them in here, because if I do at some point, I'm going to have to come back and sort them out again, even if they're not the problem. But I have a funny feeling they are the problem. Like, you look at them, they don't look great. You can see there's like splooges of like colour on, like the oil seeping out from the internals. But this Zener diode there, that tiny little Zener diode, is probably knackered too. So it's not going to be the triacs. If it was the triacs, it'd just be on. Not triacs like every semiconductor, they just fail short. And it's not like there's a sudden voltage pulse or whatever across them when I touch them, because they're constantly seeing the full mains voltage cycling across the mains frequency. So yeah, it's here, and I'm more leaning towards that Zener diode, because every time I try and put my meters or anything on it, so look, if I give it a tap now, it'll do it. If I even just put this one little clip lead on that diode, and then it's not doing it anymore. So I think me putting the clip lead on that Zener diode there's like a dodgy solder connection or something, and it's the force of the clip lead on it is pulling it into it and stopping it. Either that, or there's a minuscule internal break and the weight of the clip lead's pushing the back together again. I had that ages back on an amp I fixed. It was all surface mount. It was a 4-channel amp. There was 4 identical boards, and probing them component by component for comparison, could not find any fault. So it got to the point where I was like, right, I'm just going to have to start. It was like over biasing. So I'm thinking, well, it's in the later stages of the amps where the problem lies. So it got to the point where I was having to just remove surface mount components one at a time and swap them over. And it was, when I got to the diode, there was like a couple of diodes in the bias circuit, and they'd all tested fine. But when I actually removed it, went to unsolder, it fell apart. So I think the pressure I was putting on the edges of it, you have to put enough pressure on to get your clip leads to make a good, your meter probes to make a good contact. I think it was actually pushing the diode together, and it was reading okay. So yeah, but gotta love the dim bulb, haven't you? So yeah, anyway, that's the it's like, I'm gonna be quiet because I have neighbours these days who are saying that to one side of me. I think he's moved out, or he's moved in with his missus or whatever. They emptied the place out, so I think I'm gonna get a new neighbour soon. But even above me to the sides, there shouldn't be anyone. If they're in bed, they're in other areas of the building. But you're still, you know, still trying to be considerate, still trying to not make a ton of noise. So yeah, and also in other news, at least I've got some area to do some work again. I'm just got a couple of little shelves up and stuff with some lights on them above my old table. It's a far cry from what's going to go in here when I'm finally done, but I've at least got a little area to do some work on, you know. So you know, getting there. But yes, the interesting Studer fault. It's so annoying, the intermittent though. Like it doesn't seem to want to do it when you first turn it on, which again says something has to warm up first before it starts causing an issue. But yes, little. I don't know if you can hear it. You can hear how intermittent the on-off is as well. Anyway, yeah, stop torturing the poor old thing. It shouldn't be hurting it. The dim bulb does a brilliant job of this. Is really where dim bulbs reign supreme. Instead of being shooed in rush currents, stressing the transformer components. Light bulbs just taking the stress out of the job, and it's also a handy visual indicator out the corner of your eye. You can go, oh, hang on a minute, did I just see that flash? So yeah, anyway, as always, if you've watched this, thanks for watching, and catch you again. And yeah, I'll post an update video on this to say exactly what the fault was, if I figure out exactly what the fault was. It could be a broken track or something, one of those dodgy connections that someone's put in here. It could have been poorly done. It's one of those circuits, it's not only is it annoyingly difficult to test, because as soon as you try and test it, it stops playing up. But you've got to remember, it's all, although it's like only 12 volts, it's all at mains potential. It's all floating up and down at mains. To be honest, I'd rather put a small transformer in like here or somewhere if it would fit, just a little tiny like PCB mount transformer glued in, like epoxy resin it in, and have it do away with that dropper thing and have it just a good old-fashioned transformer isolated supply. But that's just me. I like things better that way. I've never been keen on capacitive droppers. I don't like them. But hey ho, it is what it is.